A gun pressed against her forehead, children screaming, phones recording. But Norah Griffin didn't flinch. "Call Tyrone Blackwood," she whispered, her voice steady as steel. "Now." The security guard's hand trembled. He thought he was stopping a shoplifter. He had no idea he'd just held a federal agent at gunpoint, or that this moment would destroy a nationwide conspiracy built on hate. Stay with me until the end of this story and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far truth travels. The October air in Atlanta carried that peculiar weight that comes just before the first real cold snap of the season, thick enough to feel light enough to ignore. Norah Griffin stepped out of the federal building downtown at 4:47 p.m., her navy blazer crisp despite the 12-hour day behind her. She loosened it slightly as she walked, her heels clicking a steady rhythm against the sidewalk. She'd just spent 6 hours on the witness stand. 6 hours recounting patterns of discrimination in housing loans across 3 counties. 6 hours keeping her voice level while defense attorneys tried to paint victims as liars and statistical anomalies as coincidence. 6 hours knowing that every word mattered, that families were depending on her testimony to keep their homes. Her throat was raw. Her head pounded with that specific ache that comes from sustained concentration and recycled courtroom air. All she wanted was cold medicine, her couch, and silence. Peterson's Pharmacy sat 3 blocks from her apartment, a squat brick building that had occupied the same corner since 1987. Norah had been inside maybe a dozen times in the 2 years she'd lived in the neighborhood, never memorable visits, just the mundane errands of urban life. Get in, get out, get home. She pushed through the glass door at 4:52 p.m. The pharmacy was busy in that late afternoon way, people stopping by after work, the aisles humming with the quiet shuffle of tired professionals picking up prescriptions and forgotten items. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that peculiar pharmacy glow, too bright, too sterile somehow, both clinical and commercial. Norah headed straight for the cold medicine aisle, 4th row on the left. She knew exactly what she needed, the regular store-brand decongestant, the one that actually worked without making her drowsy. Her mama had taught her that, read the active ingredients, baby, not the price tag. They're all the same thing with different boxes. She reached for a box, checking the label out of habit. That's when she felt it. Eyes. Not the casual glance of another shopper. Not the polite acknowledgement of shared space. This was different. This was weight, pressure, scrutiny. Norah had felt this particular sensation more times than she cared to count. In department stores, where she'd been shopping since she had a credit card. In coffee shops in neighborhoods where she'd lived for years. In airport security lines despite her federal credentials. It was the feeling of being watched not as a person, but as a problem. Not as a customer, but as a suspect. She didn't turn around, not yet. Instead, she read the label in her hand with exaggerated care, giving whoever was watching time to move along, to realize they'd made a mistake, to look away. The weight didn't lift. Norah placed the box back on the shelf and moved down the aisle, pretending to compare brands. Her peripheral vision caught movement, a figure at the end of the row, positioned to watch her. A security guard based on the uniform, large build, maybe 6'2", white, late 40s. His arms were crossed, his stance wide. He wasn't trying to hide his attention. Fine. Norah selected her medicine, tucked it under her arm, and walked toward the front of the store. She'd pay and leave. She'd dealt with overzealous security before. You didn't make a federal case out of every instance of being watched while black in America. You'd never have time for anything else. But as she walked, the guard moved too. Not beside her, not ahead of her. Behind her, tracking. Norah's jaw tightened. She stopped at the pain reliever section, though she didn't need anything else. A test. The guard stopped too, maintaining his distance, but never letting her leave his sight. An elderly white woman pushed her cart past them both, the guard nodding politely at her. "Evening, ma'am." His voice was rough, southern-edged. The woman smiled. "Evening." Then his eyes snapped back to Norah. She felt her pulse tick up, not from fear, but from the familiar, bitter recognition of what was happening. She'd spent the entire day testifying about discrimination, and now she was living it in real time. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so exhausting. Norah walked to the greeting card section. The guard followed. She browsed vitamins. He watched. She stopped at the pharmacy counter, waiting behind 2 other customers. The guard positioned himself 6 feet away, arms still crossed, his eyes never leaving her. The pharmacist, a young Asian American woman with kind eyes and tired shoulders, called out, "Next, please." Norah stepped forward. "Hi, do you have the flu shot available for walk-ins?" "We do." The pharmacist smiled. "Let me grab the consent form." "Excuse me." The guard's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Ma'am, I need you to step aside." Norah turned slowly, deliberately. She met his eyes, pale blue, narrowed with certainty. "I'm sorry. Step aside. I need to speak with you." The pharmacist's smile faltered. "Is everything—" "This doesn't concern you," the guard said, not looking at her. His focus remained locked on Norah. "Ma'am, I've been watching you. You've been acting suspicious." The word hung in the air. Suspicious. Norah felt the familiar heat rise in her chest, the anger that every black professional learns to bank like coals, hot enough to fuel you, controlled enough not to burn you. Suspicious how? You've been walking around the store for 10 minutes, picking things up, putting them down, looking around. That's called shopping. That's called casing the joint. His voice rose slightly. Other customers were turning now, watching. "I know what I'm seeing." Norah's fingers tightened around the medicine box in her hand. She was aware suddenly and acutely of every eye in the pharmacy. The elderly woman with her prescription bag. The teenage boy pretending to read shampoo labels. The young mother with a toddler in the cart. The pharmacist behind the counter. All of them watching. All of them about to witness who she was and who this man believed her to be. "I picked up 1 box of cold medicine." Norah said, her voice level, but loud enough to carry. "I've been in this store for less than 7 minutes, and I'm about to pay for my item and leave. You've been acting nervous, avoiding eye contact. I've been avoiding you because you've been following me. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to empty your pockets." The pharmacy seemed to contract. The hum of the fluorescent lights grew louder. Someone's phone buzzed. The automatic doors opened and closed as a customer hurried out. Norah took a slow breath. "No." The guard's face hardened. "Excuse me?" "I said no. I'm not emptying my pockets. I haven't stolen anything. I'm a customer. And you're harassing me. I'm doing my job. Your job is to protect the store. I'm not a threat to this store. That's not your call to make. And it's not yours either." Norah's voice was steel now, forged in courtrooms and depositions, and a lifetime of moments exactly like this one. "I know my rights. You have no probable cause to search me. You have no evidence I've taken anything. What you have is bias." The guard's face flushed red. "Now you listen here." "No." Norah cut him off. "You listen. My name is Norah Griffin. I'm a customer in this store. I'm trying to purchase cold medicine, and unless you have actual evidence, video witnesses, anything beyond your gut feeling, you need to step back and let me complete my transaction." The silence that followed was absolute. Then the guard reached for his radio. "Charlie, this is Wade at Peterson's. I need police backup. I've got a potential shoplifter refusing to comply." Norah's heart kicked hard against her ribs. Not from fear, she'd faced down far more intimidating opponents than Wade Montenegro, but from the sudden crystalline understanding that this was escalating in a way that could go very, very wrong. "You're calling the police," she said slowly, "because I won't let you search me without cause. I'm calling the police because you're being belligerent and uncooperative." "I'm being belligerent." Norah's voice rose now, matching his energy. "I came in here for cold medicine. Cold medicine. And you've followed me around this store like I'm public enemy number one. You want to talk about suspicious behavior? Let's talk about a grown man stalking a woman through a pharmacy for the crime of shopping while black. That's not, I don't, Wade sputtered. This has nothing to do with what? Say it. Say what you're thinking. You're putting words in my mouth? I'm reading your actions, which speak loud and clear. The teenage boy near the shampoo had his phone out now. Recording. Good, Norah thought. Let there be evidence. The pharmacist stepped forward tentatively. Maybe we could all just... The lady has merchandise she wants to pay for. Maybe we could just ring her up and... Stay out of this, Wade snapped. Don't talk to her like that, Norah said immediately. She's trying to de-escalate a situation you created. A situation you created by acting suspicious, by shopping, by acting like you have something to hide. What exactly? Norah said, her voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. Do you think I'm hiding? In my blazer? In my work slacks? Where exactly do you imagine I've concealed stolen merchandise? Wade's hand moved to his belt. Norah saw it immediately, the instinctive gesture of someone reaching for authority for power for a gun. The guard was armed. Of course he was armed. Private security companies armed their guards. She knew this. But seeing his hand rest on the weapon changed the equation entirely. You need to calm down, Wade said, his voice taking on that particular tone that men use when they're about to justify violence. You're escalating this situation. Take your hand off your weapon. Ma'am, I said take your hand off your weapon. Norah's voice cut through every conversation in the pharmacy. Customers froze. The mother pulled her toddler closer. The teenage boy's phone trembled slightly as he kept recording. Wade didn't move his hand. I'm trained to assess threats. And right now I'm displaying what anger at being racially profiled constitutional knowledge. The audacity to talk back. You need to show me some respect. And there it was, the truth beneath everything. This wasn't about theft. This wasn't about security. This was about a man who believed he deserved deference, who saw defiance as threat, who couldn't tolerate being challenged by a black woman in a navy blazer, who knew her rights and refused to perform submission. Respect is earned, Norah said quietly. You haven't earned mine. Wade's entire body went rigid. His hand tightened on his belt. His face had gone from red to purple. I am giving you one last chance to cooperate. Empty your pockets. Now. No. Then you leave me no choice. You have every choice. You're choosing this. Empty your pockets, or I will detain you by force and wait for the police. Norah felt her training kick in, the de-escalation techniques she'd learned, the ways to redirect and diffuse. But beneath that was something else. Something that had been building for 6 hours on a witness stand, for 12 years as a federal agent, for 32 years of living in brown skin in America. Enough. She was tired of de-escalating, tired of managing other people's comfort, tired of being reasonable in the face of unreason. Let me tell you what's going to happen, Norah said, her voice carrying to every corner of the store. You're going to step back. I'm going to pay for my medicine, and then I'm going to file a formal complaint against you and this pharmacy for racial profiling. Because that's what this is. That's what it's always been. I don't see color, Wade said automatically. Norah laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You don't see color? Then what exactly are you seeing that made you follow me around this store? What made you single me out from every other customer here? Your behavior was identical to every other person shopping for cold medicine on a Tuesday evening. Norah gestured around the pharmacy. Do you see anyone else being accused of theft? Anyone else being asked to empty their pockets? Or is it just me? Wade's jaw clenched. You're making this about something it's not. I'm naming what it is. You're just mad. I'm not pretending otherwise. The guard took a step forward. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time. And I'm going to tell you one more time, no. I'm not complying with an unlawful search, And if you touch me, if you lay one hand on me, you will regret it." It was a warning, clear and direct, but to Wade Montenegro it sounded like a threat. And threatened men do dangerous things. His hand moved from his belt to his holster. The snap came loose with a soft click that might as well have been a gunshot. Every person in the pharmacy gasped. The mother shoved her cart in front of her child. The elderly woman backed toward the door. The pharmacist whispered, "Oh my God." Nora's eyes locked on the weapon emerging from its holster. Everything slowed down, not the Hollywood slow motion of action movies, but the terrible crystal-clear slowness of crisis. She saw the gun rising, saw Wade's hand shaking slightly, saw his finger near the trigger, saw the moment transform from confrontation into potential tragedy. "Put the gun away," she said. Her voice didn't shake. 12 years of training held her steady. "You threaten me." Wade's voice cracked. Everyone heard it. "You threaten me. I warned you not to touch me. That's not a threat. That's a boundary." "You're a threat. You've been a threat since you walked in here." The gun was fully out now. Not pointed yet, but out. Present. A fact. Nora's mind raced through scenarios, through training, through every de-escalation protocol she'd ever learned. But underneath it all was a simpler calculation. This man was terrified. Not of her. Of losing face. Of being wrong. Of the crowd watching him make a mistake he couldn't take back. Terrified men with guns were the most dangerous creatures in America. "Listen to me very carefully," Nora said, pitching her voice lower, trying to break through his panic. "There are children in this store. There are innocent people. Whatever you think is happening here, it's not worth this. Put the gun away. We can both walk away right now. You walk away. Get out of my store." "I will. I'll leave right now. Just put the weapon away." But Wade wasn't hearing her anymore. He was hearing something else, the whisper of his own certainty, the voice that told him he was right, that she was dangerous, that he needed to establish control. The gun rose. Nora saw it happening and couldn't stop it. The barrel lifting, the trajectory clear. She had maybe 2 seconds to make a choice: fight, flight, or freeze. She chose truth. "My name is Agent Norah Griffin," she said loudly, clearly, for the recording phones and the watching crowd and the man with the shaking gun. "I work for the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, and I'm being held at gunpoint for trying to buy cold medicine." Wade's hand hesitated. "You're lying." "I'm not. My badge is in my jacket pocket, left side. I'm going to reach for it slowly. Don't move." The gun came up fully now, pointed at her chest, 15 feet away. Center mass. Training taught her that at this distance, his accuracy didn't matter. If he pulled that trigger, she was dead. The pharmacy erupted in screams. People dropped to the floor. Someone yelled about calling 911. The teenage boy kept recording his breath coming in sharp gasps. Nora raised her hands slowly, palms out. Okay, I'm not moving. But Wade, your name is Wade, right? I can see your name tag, Wade. You need to think about what you're doing right now. You need to think about how this ends. It ends with you on the ground. It ends with the police taking you away. It ends with you facing federal charges for assault with a deadly weapon on a federal officer. Nora's voice was steady, impossibly steady. It ends with you losing everything. Your job, your freedom, your future. Is that really what you want? Shut up. You're lying. You're just trying to get out of this. Then let me show you my badge. You can verify my credentials. You can call it in. But you need to lower that weapon first. Wade's gun hand trembled. His face was slick with sweat. He'd gone too far and knew it, but pride and panic had locked him in place. You're a thief. I know what I saw. What did you see? Tell me exactly what you saw me steal. You were acting. I was shopping, that's all. And you decided I didn't belong here. You decided I was a threat, and now you're holding me at gunpoint to justify that decision. No, that's not. Then what is it? Explain it to me. Explain it to all these people. Explain it to those cameras. Wade's eyes darted to the phones recording him. 3 of them now. Maybe more. Evidence. Witnesses. A permanent record of this moment. He'd wanted to catch a thief. He'd wanted to be right. He'd wanted respect. Instead, he was pointing a gun at an unarmed woman in front of a dozen witnesses while children cried and cameras rolled. And Norah Griffin, with a gun pointed at her heart and cold medicine still clutched in her hand, made a decision. She would not beg. She would not perform the fear he expected. She would not give him the satisfaction of her submission. Instead, she spoke one sentence that would change everything. Call Tyrone Blackwood. Tell him Agent Griffin needs assistance. He'll know what that means. The name hung in the air like a spell, and Norah watched it work on Wade Montenegro's face. Confusion flickered across his features first, then suspicion, then something closer to fear. His gun hand wavered slightly. Who the hell is Tyrone Blackwood? Wade's voice had lost some of its certainty. My supervisor, Norah said calmly. Assistant Director of the Civil Rights Division Southeast Region. Call the Federal Building downtown. Extension 4127. Ask for him by name. Tell him Agent Griffin is being held at gunpoint at Peterson's Pharmacy on Piedmont. He'll be very interested in this situation. You're bluffing. But Wade's voice trembled now. Am I? Then make the call. Prove me wrong. The elderly woman near the door spoke up, her voice shaking but clear. Young man, if she's telling the truth, you're in serious trouble. Maybe you should just shut up. Wade whirled toward her, the gun swinging wildly. People screamed. The woman stumbled backward, her prescription bag dropping to the floor. Keep the gun on me! Norah's voice cracked like a whip. Eyes on me, Wade. Nobody else. Just me. The gun snapped back to her. Good. Better her than a terrified 70-year-old woman. Wade's control was fracturing his movements, becoming erratic. This was the most dangerous phase when adrenaline and pride overrode reason, when a man with a weapon convinced himself that doubling down was safer than backing down. The pharmacist had her phone out now, speaking in urgent whispers to 911. Norah caught fragments. Man with a gun. Peterson's Pharmacy. Yes, he's security, but he's please hurry. Put the phone down, Wade screamed at her. The pharmacist dropped it on the counter, but didn't hang up. Smart woman. The line stayed open, recording everything. Wade's face had gone from purple to an alarming shade of gray. Sweat poured down his temples. His breathing came in sharp, shallow gasps. He was panicking, and panic made people do irreversible things. Norah knew she had seconds to regain control of this situation. Wade, listen to me. She kept her voice low, steady, the tone she'd used to talk down armed suspects and negotiate with hostile witnesses. You're not a criminal. I can see that. You thought you were doing your job. But this has gone too far. Way too far. And every second that gun stays pointed at me, you're digging yourself deeper. But we can stop this right now. Right now, Wade. Before it becomes something you can't come back from. You're trying to trick me. His finger moved closer to the trigger. You're trying to confuse me. I'm trying to save your life, because if you pull that trigger, if you shoot a federal agent in a pharmacy full of witnesses with cameras recording, you will go to prison for the rest of your life. Is that what you want? Is that worth it? I'm not going to prison. You're the criminal. You're the one what bought cold medicine? That's your crime scene. Norah's voice hardened. Look around, Wade. Look at these people. Do they look like they think I'm the threat here? Or do they look terrified of you? Wade's eyes darted around the pharmacy. The mother crouched over her crying toddler, using her body as a shield. The teenage boy backed against the vitamin display, still recording but ready to run. The elderly woman pressed against the door, one hand on the handle. The pharmacist white-knuckled the counter edge. Every single face showed the same expression, fear of the man with the gun, not fear of the black woman in the blazer. They don't understand, Wade said desperately. They don't see what I see. I have instincts. I have training. I know. What training? Norah cut him off. Who trained you to profile customers based on skin color? Who taught you that shopping while black is suspicious behavior? Who told you to draw a weapon on an unarmed woman buying cold medicine? My company, Blackstone Security. They taught me to watch for patterns to identify threats to what? Say it. Finish that sentence. Wade's mouth opened and closed. He couldn't say it, couldn't voice the ugly truth of what he'd been trained to do, but they both knew it hung between them, unspoken and undeniable. Blackstone Security, Norah repeated slowly. You work for Blackstone Security. Something changed in her voice, a note of recognition, of significance. Wade caught it immediately. What? You know them? Norah smiled, and it wasn't a warm expression. It was the smile of someone holding all the cards and finally ready to lay them down. Oh, I know Blackstone Security very well. See, Wade, here's what you don't know about me. For the past 8 months, I've been investigating Blackstone for systematic racial profiling across 17 states. Civil rights violations, discriminatory practices, training programs that encourage guards to target black customers. I've interviewed 47 victims, collected hundreds of incident reports, analyzed your company's internal communications and training materials. Wade's face went slack. And today, Norah continued, her voice gaining strength. I spent 6 hours testifying in federal court about patterns of discrimination. I was the lead witness in a housing discrimination case, but that's just the beginning. Because next month I'm scheduled to present my findings on Blackstone Security to a federal grand jury. I've been building a case against your company for racial profiling, for creating a culture of discrimination, for training guards like you to treat black customers as threats. That's not we don't. You just did it, Wade. You just profiled me, followed me, accused me without evidence. And then you pulled a gun on me when I refused to submit to an illegal search. You've done exactly what I've been investigating. You've given me a perfect documented witnessed example of everything I've been trying to prove. The color drained from Wade's face. No, that's not. I didn't know. Didn't know what? That I was a federal agent. Would it have been okay to profile me if I wasn't? Would it have been fine to pull a gun on me if I'd been a teacher, a nurse, a student? Does my job title determine whether I deserve basic human dignity? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Wade's gun hand was shaking violently now. The weapon bobbed in the air, no longer steadily aimed, but wavering dangerously. Norah's training screamed at her an unstable grip, an emotional shooter, a finger near the trigger. This was how accidents happened. How, I didn't mean to, became, I can't take it back. I'm good at my job, Wade said, and his voice cracked. I catch shoplifters. I've caught dozens. I know what to look for. I have a 93% success rate. 93%. My supervisor says I'm one of the best they have. I get bonuses, commendations. I'm good at this. 93%, Norah repeated. 93% of the people you've accused have been black, haven't they? The question landed like a physical blow. Wade staggered back half a step. Haven't they, Wade? I don't keep track of. I do. I have your records. Blackstone keeps excellent documentation. Every stop, every accusation, every arrest. 47 stops in the last 2 years. 44 of them were black customers. 2 were Hispanic. 1 was Middle Eastern. 0 were white. 0 Wade. In 2 years of excellent security work, you've never once stopped a white customer. That's coincidence. That's discrimination. That's civil rights violations. That's federal crimes. No. The gun came up again, this time aimed directly at her head. You're twisting it. You're making it sound like something it's not. I'm not racist. I don't care about color. I just do my job. By targeting black people. By catching criminals. Who you've decided are criminals based on their skin color. Shut up, just shut up. Wade's voice broke completely. He was crying now. Tears streaming down his face, the gun shaking so hard, Norah could hear the faint rattle of metal on leather as it knocked against his belt. You don't know what it's like. The pressure. The quotas. They tell us we have to make stops, we have to catch people. We have to show numbers or we get fired. You think I want to do this? You think I want to be the bad guy? I'm just trying to keep my job. I'm just trying to survive. And there it was. The truth beneath the bravado. Not evil, but cowardice. Not hatred, but fear. A man who'd sold his integrity for job security, who'd convinced himself that following orders absolved him of responsibility, who'd built his success on the backs of innocent people and called it professionalism. Norah felt something shift inside her chest. Not sympathy, she'd save that for his victims, but understanding. Sad, bitter understanding of how systems of oppression worked. They didn't just hurt the oppressed. They corrupted the oppressors, turned them into instruments of injustice, gave them just enough power to feel important and just enough fear to ensure compliance. Wade, she said quietly, I know you're scared. I know you feel trapped. But this, she gestured at the gun, at the terrified people, at the disaster unfolding around them. This isn't the answer. This isn't going to save your job. This isn't going to make any of this better. The only thing this does is transform you from a man who made mistakes into a man who committed felonies. I can't go back. Oh, Wade sobbed. I can't undo this. It's too late. It's not too late until you pull that trigger. Right now, this is assault. This is illegal detention. These are charges you could fight, maybe even defend. But if you shoot me, if you hurt anyone in this store, there's no coming back from that. You go from being a man who panicked to being a murderer. And no amount of training, no corporate policy, no fear for your job will matter anymore. You'll just be a man who killed an innocent woman in a pharmacy. The gun pressed closer to her face now, inches from her forehead. Norah could see down the barrel, could see Wade's finger white against the trigger, could smell the gun oil and her own fear sweat and the antiseptic pharmacy air. She'd faced death before. In the line of duty, in moments of crisis. But never like this. Never so personal, so close, so utterly senseless. Call Tyrone Blackwood. She repeated, her voice somehow still steady. Last chance, Wade. Call him. Let him verify who I am. Let him bring agents who can sort this out properly. Or pull that trigger and spend the rest of your life knowing you killed a woman for trying to buy cold medicine. Wade's whole body convulsed with sobs. The gun pressed against her forehead, the metal cold and hard against her skin. I can't. I don't. You can. You choose. Right now. You choose what happens next. In the distance, sirens wailed. Faint at first, then growing louder. The 911 call had worked. Police were coming. The equation was about to change dramatically. Wade heard them too. His eyes went wide. They're coming. They're coming, and they're going to think they're going to see... They're going to see exactly what this is, Norah said. So you need to make a decision before they arrive. Are you the security guard who made a terrible mistake and surrendered? Or are you the man who held a federal agent hostage? The sirens were closer now, maybe 30 seconds away. The teenage boy's phone was still recording. The pharmacist's 911 line was still open. The mother clutched her crying child. The elderly woman had her hand on the door ready to flee the moment she could. And Norah Griffin stood with a gun pressed to her forehead, counting heartbeats, calculating odds, preparing for whatever came next. It's going to be okay, she told Wade softly. However this ends, you're going to survive it. But you have to choose, right now. Gun down or consequences forever. Wade's finger trembled on the trigger. The sirens hit their crescendo outside. Car doors slammed. Heavy boots on pavement. Radio chatter at the door. This is your last moment, Norah whispered. Choose. Wade's eyes met hers, red, terrified, desperate. In them she saw a man drowning, reaching for anything to save himself, not understanding that the thing he was clutching would drag him under. The pharmacy door burst open. Police dropped the weapon. 4 officers' guns drawn, fanning out with practiced precision. They took in the scene, instantly armed security guard weapon to a woman's head, civilians cowering, phones recording. "Drop it now!" Wade's gun pressed harder against Nora's forehead. His other hand grabbed her shoulder, pulling her in front of him like a shield. Stay back, or you'll what?" The lead officer, a black woman with sergeant stripes, moved closer, her weapon trained on Wade. "You'll shoot an unarmed woman. Is that your play? That's your move. She's a thief. She's a criminal. I caught her." "She's a customer with cold medicine," the pharmacist shouted from behind the counter. "He's been harassing her. We all saw it. He just attacked her." I didn't." Wade's voice rose to a shriek. Tell them you were shoplifting." "I wasn't," Nora said calmly. She didn't look at the officers. She kept her eyes on Wade. "My name is Agent Norah Griffin, Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. My credentials are in my left jacket pocket. This man has been holding me at gunpoint for," she glanced at the pharmacy clock, "7 minutes now, because I tried to buy cold medicine while black." The sergeant's eyes widened fractionally. "Agent Griffin." "Yes." "Can you verify that?" "My badge number is 437952. My supervisor is Assistant Director Tyrone Blackwood. Federal Building, downtown. His direct line is 404-555-4127. Call him, he'll confirm." The sergeant gestured to one of her officers, who immediately moved toward the pharmacy counter to make the call. But her eyes never left Wade. "Sir, you're assaulting a federal officer. That's a federal crime. You need to lower your weapon right now before this gets any worse for you." "She's lying. She's just saying that to what? Get you to stop pointing a gun at her head." The sergeant's voice was sharp. "That seems like a pretty reasonable goal. I know my rights. I have the right to detain suspected criminals. You have the right to detain shoplifters with probable cause. Do you have probable cause?" She was acting suspicious. How? She was walking around picking things up. Like a customer. No, like someone casing the place. The sergeant glanced at Nora, taking in her professional attire, her calm demeanor, the single box of cold medicine still clutched in her hand. Then she looked back at Wade, at his tears and panic, and the gun shaking against an innocent woman's skull. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time. Lower your weapon, release the woman, and we can sort this out without anyone getting hurt." "I won't go down for this. I was doing my job." "Your job doesn't include holding people at gunpoint. My company trained me, Blackstone Security. They taught me to identify threats. They gave me protocols. I followed the protocols. The protocol for cold medicine shoppers involves firearms. You don't understand. You're not listening. None of you are listening." Wade was screaming now, spit flying, the gun grinding against Nora's forehead hard enough to bruise. "I'm good at my job. I catch criminals. I protect this store. I've saved them thousands in losses, and this is how I'm treated. Like I'm the bad guy. Like I'm the criminal." "You're the one with a gun to someone's head," the sergeant said flatly. The officer at the pharmacy counter spoke up. "Sarge, I've got someone from the DOJ on the line. Says they're sending agents. They confirm Agent Norah Griffin is one of theirs, and they want us to maintain the scene until they arrive." The sergeant nodded grimly. "How long?" "They said 12 minutes. They're scrambling a response team." 12 minutes. An eternity in a hostage situation. Nora felt Wade's grip tighten on her shoulder, felt the gun press harder, felt his ragged breath on her neck as he processed what he'd just heard. She was telling the truth. She really was a federal agent. And he'd held her at gunpoint. "Oh God," Wade moaned. "Oh God, oh God, oh God." "Wade." Nora spoke softly just for him. "Listen to me. You heard them. My people are coming. The people I work with, the agents I serve with. They're going to be here in 12 minutes. And when they arrive, they're going to see this scene. They're going to see their colleague with a gun to her head. They're going to see the man responsible. How do you think that's going to go?" Wade made a sound like a wounded animal. "But it doesn't have to be that way," Norah continued. "You can end this right now. You can lower the gun. You can surrender to these officers. You can cooperate, show remorse, demonstrate that you're not a threat. Give yourself a chance at mercy. Because if you're still holding me when my team arrives, mercy won't be on the table. Survival might not even be on the table. They'll shoot me. They might. Federal agents take threats to their own very seriously. But right now you're not a threat. You're a scared man who made mistakes. You can still be that man. Or you can be a domestic terrorist holding a federal officer hostage. You choose." The sergeant spoke up again. "She's right. You surrender to us right now, we can keep this calm. But if you're still armed when the feds arrive, I can't guarantee what happens. They won't have the patience we have. They won't negotiate. They'll see one of their own in danger, and they'll respond accordingly." Wade's grip loosened slightly on Norah's shoulder. The gun pulled back from her forehead maybe an inch. Progress. "I didn't mean for this," he whispered. "I didn't mean for any of this." "I know," Norah said, though she didn't entirely believe it. "But intentions don't erase actions. What matters now is what you do next." Outside, more sirens. The original police response was being reinforced. This was escalating from a simple disturbance call to a full incident. News crews would be here soon. Helicopters, crowds, the whole machinery of crisis response grinding into motion. And somewhere across the city, Tyrone Blackwood was mobilizing his team fury and fear, propelling them through traffic toward this pharmacy, toward their agent in danger, toward the moment that would validate every investigation they'd been building. Wade seemed to sense it too, the narrowing window, the approaching reckoning, the absolute end of any path that didn't involve surrender or violence. "If I put the gun down," he said slowly, "what happens to me?" The sergeant met Norah's eyes silently, asking permission to answer. Norah gave the smallest nod. "You'll be arrested," the sergeant said honestly. "Multiple charges. Assault with a deadly weapon. Assault on a federal officer. False imprisonment. Probably others. You'll be processed, arraigned, held pending trial. But you'll be alive, and you'll have the chance to tell your side, to explain what happened, to maybe convince a jury that you panicked rather than intended harm. That's not nothing. And if I don't, then this ends badly for everyone, especially you." Wade stood frozen, the gun still against Norah's head, but no longer pressing his hand on her shoulder, but no longer gripping his whole body, locked in the paralysis of impossible choice. In the pharmacy, time stretched. The toddler had stopped crying, shock silencing even childhood fear. The teenage boy's phone battery was probably dying, but he kept recording. The elderly woman had given up on escaping and simply stood witness, her face carved with horror and grief. The pharmacist gripped the counter like it was the only solid thing left in the world, and Norah Griffin, exhausted from a long day, wanting nothing more than cold medicine, and her couch, stood at the center of a moment that would define her case, vindicate her investigation, and demonstrate everything she'd been fighting to expose. "Clock's ticking, Wade," the sergeant said. "Make your choice." Norah felt the gun barrel tremble against her skin, felt Wade's hand shake on her shoulder, felt the decision crystallize in the air around them. And then from the pocket of her blazer, her phone rang. The ringtone cut through the tension like a knife, a simple, clear tone she'd programmed for one specific number. Tyrone Blackwood was calling. The ringtone seemed impossibly loud in the frozen pharmacy, cutting through layers of fear and tension like a bell tolling in a silent church. Everyone's eyes snapped to Norah's jacket pocket, where the phone continued its insistent buzzing. "Don't answer it," Wade said immediately, his voice cracking. "That's my supervisor," Norah replied calmly. "The man I told you to call. He's calling me instead. Don't answer it." "Wade, he already knows I'm in trouble. The police called him. Remember, if I don't answer, he's going to assume the worst. And if he assumes the worst, the response you get will be very different from the one you want." The sergeant stepped forward slightly. "Sir, let her answer the phone. Let her tell her supervisor she's safe. That's in everyone's best interest. How do I know she won't say something to what? Make this worse for you. The sergeant's voice was dry. Brother, you're holding a federal agent at gunpoint in front of multiple witnesses and cameras. I don't think it gets much worse. The phone continued ringing. 4 rings now. 5. In a few seconds it would go to voicemail, and Tyrone Blackwood would make assumptions that would turn this pharmacy into a war zone. Let me answer it, Norah said. Let me tell him I'm okay. That's all. Just that I'm safe, and the situation is being handled. You can listen to every word. Wade's grip tightened on her shoulder, then loosened, then tightened again. His indecision was written in every trembling muscle. Finally, he jerked his head in a nod. Speaker. Put it on speaker so I can hear. Okay, I'm going to reach into my pocket slowly, just getting my phone. Nothing else. She moved with exaggerated care, sliding her hand into her jacket pocket while Wade's gun followed the movement. Her fingers closed around the phone. She pulled it out, thumbed the speaker button, and held it where everyone could hear. Tyrone. Norah. The voice that came through was deep controlled, but edged with barely contained fury. I need you to tell me exactly what's happening right now. I'm at Peterson's Pharmacy on Piedmont. There's been an incident. A security guard believed I was shoplifting. The situation escalated. But I'm safe, and local police are on scene managing things. Managing things. Tyrone repeated the words like they tasted bitter. The call I got said you were being held at gunpoint. That was accurate at the time of the call. And now... Norah felt Wade's hand trembling on her shoulder, felt the gun barrel still pressed to her temple. We're in negotiations. A pause on the other end of the line. When Tyrone spoke again, his voice had dropped to something cold and dangerous. Put him on. What? Wade's voice cracked. The man with the gun. Put him on the phone. Now. The sergeant caught Norah's eye, nodding encouragement. This was good. This was de-escalation. A voice of authority that Wade might actually listen to. Norah held the phone closer to Wade. He wants to talk to you. I can't. Wade Montenegro. Tyrone's voice carried the weight of 20 years in federal law enforcement. That is your name, correct? The security guard at Peterson's Pharmacy. How do you know I know everything about you right now. Age 47. Employed by Blackstone Security for 3 years. Previous work in retail loss prevention. 2 complaints filed against you in the last 18 months for aggressive behavior toward customers. Both complaints filed by black women. Both complaints dismissed by your company. Should I continue? Wade's face had gone gray. You can't. That's private. Nothing is private anymore. Not when you put a gun to one of my agents. So here's how this is going to work. You're going to lower your weapon. You're going to step away from Agent Griffin. You're going to surrender to the officers on scene. And you're going to do all of that in the next 60 seconds before I arrive with a team that won't be as patient as those police officers. I didn't know she was. I thought she was. You thought she was what Wade say it. I want to hear you say it. She was acting suspicious. Shopping. She was shopping. And you decided that was suspicious because of what her clothing, her demeanor, or the color of her skin. That's not, I've read your file, Wade. Every stop you've made, every accusation. 47 incidents in 3 years. 44 of them targeting black customers. That's not random. That's not coincidence. That's policy. That's training. And that's exactly what Agent Griffin has been investigating. The words landed like physical blows. Wade staggered, his grip on Norah loosening. She said she told me she was investigating, but I thought she was lying. She doesn't lie. That's not in her nature. Unlike the people who trained you. Unlike the company that taught you to treat black customers as threats. Unlike the supervisors who gave you bonuses for those 44 stops. They said they told us we were protecting the stores. They told you to profile. They gave you quotas. They incentivized discrimination. And now you're going to tell me everything about how they did it." Wade made a choking sound. "I can't. If I talk, they'll what, fire you, Wade? You're going to prison. Your employment status is the least of your concerns right now. But how long you stay in prison, what charges you face, whether you have any future at all beyond those walls, that depends on your choices in the next 60 seconds. You're trying to trick me. I'm trying to save your life." Tyrone's voice cracked like thunder. "Because right now, I'm 5 minutes away from that pharmacy with 6 agents who are very, very concerned about their colleagues' safety. And if you're still holding her when we arrive, if you're still armed, if you've given us any reason to believe she's in imminent danger, we will respond with the full force available to us. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" The sergeant spoke up, her voice cutting through Wade's panic. "Sir, this is Sergeant Williams, Atlanta PD. I strongly recommend you listen to Assistant Director Blackwood. We have this situation contained right now, but that window is closing fast." "I'll testify." Wade's voice rose to a shriek. "I'll tell you everything. The training programs, the quotas, the bonus systems. I have records. I kept records. I thought if something went wrong, I'd need proof that I was just following orders." Norah felt something electric pass through her body. He kept records. This man, this scared, panicking security guard, had documented the very conspiracy she'd been trying to expose. Tyrone's voice gentled slightly, taking on the tone of a man reeling in a catch. "That's good, Wade. That's very good. Those records could be valuable. They could help us understand the full scope of what Blackstone has been doing. They could help us protect other people from going through what you're going through right now." I'm not a bad person," Wade sobbed. "I'm not racist. I wanted to be good at my job. I wanted to keep my job." "I believe you," Tyrone said, and there was a thread of genuine sympathy in his voice now. "I believe you were put in an impossible situation. I believe your company exploited your fears and your need for employment. I believe they turned you into something you never wanted to be. But Wade, right now, none of that matters as much as what you do next. Put down the gun. Let Agent Griffin go. Surrender peacefully. And then we can talk about how to make this right." "How do I make this right? I held a federal agent at gunpoint." "You cooperate. You tell the truth. You help us dismantle the system that created this situation. You become part of the solution instead of part of the problem." The gun trembled against Norah's head. She could feel Wade's whole body shaking now, racked with sobs and terror and the crushing weight of realization. He'd crossed a line. He knew it. Everyone knew it. The only question was what happened next. 45 seconds, Wade," Tyrone said quietly. "My team is pulling up outside right now. You've got 45 seconds to be the man who surrendered or the man who didn't. Choose." Norah heard it then, new vehicles arriving, doors slamming, voices calling out in the clipped, professional tones of federal agents establishing a perimeter. The local police were being reinforced by something much more serious. The sergeant heard it too. "Sir, that's your last window. Right now. This moment. Choose life." Wade's breathing had become ragged, desperate. "If I surrender, if I tell you everything, will you protect me?" "From what?" Tyrone asked. "From them. From Blackstone. They have lawyers, resources. They'll destroy me. They'll say I acted alone, that I violated policy, that I was a rogue employee. I've seen them do it to other guards. I've seen them throw people away." "Then help us throw them away first," Tyrone said. "Give us the evidence. Testify. Be the first one to tell the truth. Because I promise you, Wade, we're going to bring them down with or without your help. The only question is whether you go down with them or whether you help us build the case." Norah spoke for the first time since the call began, her voice soft but clear. "Wade, I meant what I said earlier. You're not evil. You're not the real villain here. You're a tool, a weapon they aimed at innocent people. But you don't have to be that anymore. You can put down the gun. You can tell the truth. You can be the person who helped stop this." "I'm scared," Wade whispered. I know, but scared is better than dead. And dead is where this ends if you don't choose right now. For a long moment, nothing moved. The pharmacy held its breath. The phone line hummed with tension. Outside, federal agents were taking positions, calculating angles, preparing for the worst. And then slowly, infinitely slowly, Wade's hand began to move. The gun pulled away from Nora's head. Inch by inch, trembling violently, the barrel lifted away from her temple and rose toward the ceiling. Wade's other hand released her shoulder. He took one step back, then another. I'm putting it down, he said, his voice broken. I'm putting it down. Don't shoot. Please don't shoot. Down on the ground. The sergeant and her officers moved immediately, weapons-trained voices sharp with command. On your knees, hands behind your head. Do it now. Wade dropped to his knees, the gun clattering to the floor beside him. He clasped his hands behind his head, still sobbing. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean, I never wanted. Two officers rushed forward, securing the weapon, while a third moved in with handcuffs. They had Wade on his face in seconds, hands cuffed behind his back, one officer's knee in his back, while another patted him down for additional weapons. Nora stepped away, her legs suddenly unsteady. The sergeant caught her elbow. You okay? Yeah. Yes. Nora took a shaking breath. I'm okay. That was one hell of a negotiation. That was one hell of a suspect. The pharmacy doors burst open, and Tyrone Blackwood strode in like an avenging angel. He was a big man, 6'4", 240 pounds of controlled fury, in a crisp suit that somehow hadn't wrinkled, despite the emergency rush across the city. His eyes swept the scene, taking in everything before locking onto Nora. Agent Griffin? Sir. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and pulled her into a brief, hard hug that spoke volumes about his relief and rage. Then he held her at arm's length, checking her over with professional efficiency. You injured? No. Shaken but unharmed. Good, because I'm about to need you very functional. We've got a lot of work to do. He turned to the officers securing Wade. I'm taking custody of this suspect. Federal charges. He's coming with us. The sergeant nodded. He's all yours. Fair warning, he's pretty fragile right now. Fragile is workable. Tyrone moved toward Wade, who was being hauled to his feet by the officers. Wade Montenegro, you're under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon on a federal officer, false imprisonment, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and about 6 other charges my legal team will enumerate when we get downtown. You have the right to remain silent. I want to talk, Wade interrupted. I said I'd talk, and I meant it. I'll tell you everything. Tyrone paused mid-Miranda. We're still going to finish reading you your rights. You'll have a chance to talk afterward with a lawyer present if you want one. I don't want a lawyer. They'll tell me to stay quiet. I'm done being quiet. I'm done protecting them. Them being Blackstone Security. Yes, all of them. The trainers, the regional managers, the executives. They knew. They all knew what they were teaching us to do. They just never said it out loud. They used code words, euphemisms, but we all knew what they meant. 4 federal agents entered the pharmacy, moving with practiced coordination to establish a scene. One immediately began photographing everything. Another started taking witness statements. A third secured the area where the confrontation had occurred. The fourth, a young black man with glasses and a tablet, began documenting chain of custody for evidence. Tyrone gestured to 2 of his team. Get him downtown. Separate interview room. I want everything recorded. And get me someone from the U.S. Attorney's Office. We're going to need immunity agreements drawn up fast if he's serious about cooperating. As the agents led Wade toward the door, he twisted to look back at Nora. His face was destroyed, red swollen, streaked with tears. I'm sorry. For what it's worth. I'm sorry. Nora met his eyes. Tell the truth. That's how you apologize. Tell the whole truth, and help us make sure this never happens to anyone else." Wade nodded and was led out, disappearing into the evening darkness beyond the pharmacy doors. The moment he was gone, the adrenaline that had been holding Norah upright evaporated. Her knees buckled. Tyrone caught her, guiding her to sit on the floor right there in the cold medicine aisle. "Easy. Just breathe. You're okay. It's over." "He was going to shoot me." The words came out flat, shocked. "At one point his finger was on the trigger, and I really thought, but he didn't. You talked him down. You were brilliant." "I was terrified." "Terror and brilliance aren't mutually exclusive." Tyrone sat down beside her, his suit be damned. "You did exactly what you were trained to do. You stayed calm. You de-escalated. You turned a hostage situation into a witness interview. That's exceptional work, Norah." She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "I came here for cold medicine." "Well, you got that, and a major break in our case. Silver lining." "Some silver lining. A man held me at gunpoint because I dared to shop while black." Tyrone's face hardened. "Which is exactly what we've been documenting, what we've been trying to prove. And now we have it on camera with multiple witnesses, with the perpetrator ready to testify about the training that led to this moment. Norah, this is the case. This is what we've been building toward." The pharmacist approached hesitantly, holding out a bottle of water. "Ma'am, you probably need this." Norah took it gratefully. "Thank you. And thank you for calling 911. I should have done it sooner. I should have intervened when I first saw him following you. I didn't think it would." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry. You did what you could. You called for help. That matters." The teenage boy who'd been recording edged closer, his phone still in his hand. Excuse me, Agent Griffin, I got everything on video. From when he first confronted you until he surrendered. Do you want me to send it to you?" Tyrone stood immediately. "Son, that video is evidence. We're going to need your phone." The boy's face fell. We'll return it. But right now what you recorded is crucial to our investigation. You might have just documented the most important civil rights case of the decade." "Really?" "Really." Tyrone gestured to one of his agents. "Get his information, get the video secured, and get a statement." As the agent led the boy away, Tyrone helped Norah to her feet. "Can you walk?" "Yeah, I think so." "Good, because we need to get you downtown for a full debriefing, and then you need to go home, take tomorrow off, and process what just happened." "Take tomorrow off, are you kidding? We have a witness ready to testify against Blackstone. We need you healthy and whole, not traumatized and burned out. Norah, you were held at gunpoint. You need time to process that." "I'll process it after we nail Blackstone to the wall." Tyrone smiled grimly. "That's why you're one of my best agents. But I'm serious. Tonight we debrief. Tomorrow you rest. The day after we burn their empire down. Deal?" "Deal." They walked toward the pharmacy exit past the elderly woman who'd witnessed everything. She reached out, touching Norah's arm gently. "You were so brave, dear. So brave." "Thank you. I'm going to tell everyone I know about what happened here, about how that man treated you, about what that company taught him to do. This isn't right. It's not right, and people need to know." "They will," Norah promised. "They're going to know everything." Outside, the scene had transformed into a full federal response. Multiple vehicles, crime scene tape agents moving with purpose. News vans were arriving, cameras deploying, reporters scrambling for position. This was going to be a story, a big one. Tyrone's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then swore softly. Blackstone's executive team just issued a statement. They're calling this an isolated incident by a rogue employee. They're claiming Wade violated company policy and training. Norah felt fury ignite in her chest. He kept records. He said he kept records. Then we're going to get those records, tonight, before Blackstone realizes what they're dealing with and starts shredding evidence. Tyrone made a call, speaking rapidly. I need a search warrant for Wade Montenegro's residence. Everything. Computers, documents, phones, and I need it in the next 2 hours. No, I don't care if you have to wake a judge. This is a federal civil rights case with a cooperating witness and a major corporation about to destroy evidence. Thank you. He hung up and turned to Norah. You up for one more thing tonight? What? Sitting in on Wade's initial interview. You're the investigating agent. You know this case better than anyone. And you're the victim. Your presence might keep him honest. The victim who wants to see his employers go down as badly as he does? Exactly. Norah thought about it. Thought about facing Wade again, about sitting across from the man who'd held a gun to her head. Thought about the fear and the fury and the exhaustion. Then she thought about the 44 other people he'd falsely accused. The hundreds or thousands of other customers targeted by Blackstone-trained guards. The entire system of discrimination that had created this moment. Let's go, she said. We've got work to do. Tyrone grinned. There's my agent. They climbed into a federal vehicle, Norah still clutching the box of cold medicine she'd never paid for. As they pulled away from Peterson's pharmacy, she looked back at the building. Just a simple corner drugstore. A place she'd been dozens of times without incident. Until tonight, when it became the place where everything changed. The place where a conspiracy was finally dragged into the light. The place where Wade Montenegro's choices would ripple outward, touching thousands of lives, toppling corporate titans, rewriting security industry practices. The place where Norah Griffin, who just wanted cold medicine after a long day, instead got justice. The federal building's underground parking garage was nearly empty at 8 p.m., their headlights cutting through concrete shadows as Tyrone pulled into a reserved space near the elevator bank. Norah climbed out her legs, still unsteady, her blazer wrinkled for the first time in her professional life. She caught her reflection in the vehicle's tinted window and barely recognized herself. Hair disheveled, eyes hollow, a red mark on her forehead where the gun barrel had pressed. You sure you're up for this? Tyrone asked, though they both knew the answer. I'm sure I can't sleep until I hear what he has to say. They rode the elevator to the 4th floor in silence, the fluorescent lights harsh after the adrenaline darkness. The Civil Rights Division offices were mostly dark, just a few workaholics still at their desks, but the conference room at the end of the hall blazed with activity. Through the glass walls, Norah could see Wade Montenegro sitting at a metal table flanked by 2 agents. He looked smaller, somehow diminished without his uniform and weapon, just a middle-aged man in a wrinkled security shirt with his hands cuffed in front of him. He's been asking for you, Agent Marcus Chen said as they approached. Chen was one of their best interrogators, a former Marine with a psychology degree and the patience of a saint. Keep saying he needs to tell you specifically, that you'll understand. Understand what? Norah asked. How it happened, how he became this. Chen handed her a file folder. We did a preliminary background, clean record until 3 years ago. Worked retail management for 15 years. Lost his job when the company downsized. Unemployed for 8 months. Wife left him. Lost his house. Then Blackstone hired him. Gave him purpose again. Identity. A uniform. Norah scanned the file, seeing the familiar pattern: economic desperation, social isolation, a company that exploited vulnerability and called it opportunity. They found someone with nothing to lose. And gave him just enough to make him loyal, Tyrone added. Classic recruitment. Let's hear what he has to say. They entered the interview room together. Wade's head snapped up, his eyes locking on Norah with desperate intensity. You came. I wasn't sure you would. You said you had information about Blackstone's training practices, Norah said, keeping her voice neutral as she took the seat across from him. Tyrone stood by the door, arms crossed, a silent wall of federal authority. I'm here to listen. I need you to understand something first. Wade's voice was hoarse from crying. I wasn't always like this. The man who held a gun on you tonight, that's not who I am. That's who they made me. Tell me how. Wade took a shaking breath. The first day of training at Blackstone, they showed us videos. Shoplifting incidents, robberies, assaults in retail environments. Every single perpetrator in those videos was black or Hispanic. Every single one. They never said watch out for black people. They just showed us the videos over and over until we associated those faces with threat. Nora's jaw tightened. Pattern recognition training. They called it threat assessment. They gave us statistics, skewed statistics I realize now about crime rates by demographic. They taught us to look for behavioral indicators that were just coded descriptions of how black people shop, how they dress, how they move through stores. Baggy clothes, groups of young people, furtive movements. They never said the quiet part out loud, but we all knew what they meant. Did you keep documentation of this training? Tyrone asked from the door. Wade nodded frantically. In my home office, I kept everything. The training manuals, the videos on USB drives, the email chains with my supervisors. I had a feeling, even then I had a feeling something wasn't right. That if things went bad, I'd need proof I was just doing what they taught me. Why? Chen asked. Why keep the evidence if you thought it was legitimate? Because deep down, I knew it wasn't. Wade's voice cracked. I knew we were profiling. I knew we were targeting people based on race. But they made it sound so official, so professional. They gave us metrics and quotas and told us we were protecting communities. And I needed that job. God, I needed it so badly. After losing everything after my wife left after months of rejection letters and empty bank accounts, Blackstone made me feel valuable again. Important. Like I mattered. So you did what they asked, Nora said quietly. I did what they rewarded. Every month they'd post leaderboards showing which guards made the most stops, the most apprehensions. They'd give bonuses, cash bonuses for hitting certain numbers. Top performers got recognition, better shifts, opportunities for promotion, and the stops that counted most, the ones in high-risk neighborhoods. Which were predominantly black neighborhoods, Tyrone stated. Yes, they'd send us to malls and stores in those areas and tell us to be extra vigilant. They'd coach us on our monthly reviews saying things like, "You're doing good work, but you need to be more proactive. Trust your instincts. Don't second-guess yourself when you see suspicious behavior." They trained us to see black people as suspicious just by existing in retail spaces. Nora leaned forward. You mentioned email chains. What kind of communications are we talking about? Wade's eyes lit with something between shame and vindication. Everything. Regional managers sending directives about problem locations. Training supervisors sharing best practices for identifying shoplifters. Corporate executives approving bonus structures tied to apprehension numbers. I printed out emails where my supervisor literally wrote "good instincts" on that stop, after I detained a black teenager who turned out to be completely innocent. The kid's mother threatened to sue, and my supervisor told me not to worry, that Blackstone would handle it. Did they? Paid her off. Made her sign an NDA. I saw the paperwork because my supervisor wanted to reassure me that the company protects its people. I realized then that this had happened before, probably dozens of times. Blackstone has a legal strategy for this, a budget line for settlements. They knew we were violating civil rights. They just treated it as a cost of doing business. The room went silent. Chen and Tyrone exchanged glances. Nora felt her heart pounding. This was bigger than she'd imagined. Not just implicit bias training gone wrong, but conscious corporate policy with legal infrastructure to protect it. Wade, Tyrone said slowly, are you telling me that Blackstone Security has a systematic practice of paying settlements to victims of racial profiling and requiring NDAs to cover it up? Yes, I have copies of 3 settlement agreements in my files. I took them from my supervisor's office when he asked me to shred them. I couldn't do it. Something in me couldn't destroy that evidence. Why not? Because those were people. Real people we'd hurt. And I was part of it. I couldn't make them disappear completely, so I kept the records, like a confession I was too afraid to make. Norah studied his face. Until tonight. Until tonight, when I looked at you with that gun in my hand and saw myself clearly for the first time. Not a security guard, not a professional, just a man threatening an innocent woman because she made me feel small by refusing to be afraid. Wade's voice dropped to a whisper. I saw my father. Your father. He was a cop in Alabama, old school. Racist as hell, though he never would have admitted it. I grew up listening to him talk about those people and that element, and watching him treat black folks like they were guilty until proven innocent. I hated him for it, swore I'd never be like him. And then tonight, with a gun pressed to your head, I realized I'd become exactly what I despised. The raw honesty in his voice was almost painful to hear. Norah wanted to hate this man, to write him off as irredeemable. But she saw something more complicated, a person who'd been weaponized by a system who'd traded his integrity for economic survival, who'd only found his conscience when faced with the worst version of himself. If we get those records, Tyrone said, if we get your full cooperation and testimony, we can take down Blackstone Security. Not just your branch, the entire company, nationwide operations, executive leadership. We can expose the whole conspiracy. That's what I want, Wade said with sudden intensity. I want them exposed. I want everyone to know what they did. How they took desperate people and turned us into instruments of discrimination. How they made money off of racism and called it security. Chen pulled out a legal pad. Then let's start with names. Regional managers, training supervisors, corporate executives, everyone who knew what was happening and encouraged it. For the next 2 hours, Wade talked. Names spilled out like water from a broken dam. Richard Holloway, Southeast Regional Director, who'd personally designed the threat assessment training videos. Sandra Chen, VP of Operations, who'd approved the bonus structure tied to apprehension numbers. Michael Torres, Chief Legal Counsel, who'd negotiated settlements and drafted NDAs. Gerald Blackstone himself, the founder and CEO, who'd built an empire on coded discrimination. Norah took notes, her hand cramping from the speed of writing, her mind racing to connect dots and identify patterns. This wasn't just a case anymore. This was a RICO conspiracy. This was systematic civil rights violations. This was criminal enterprise masquerading as legitimate business. How many settlements do you think Blackstone has paid out? Tyrone asked. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Wade rubbed his face. Every regional office has its own legal team to handle complaints. They settle fast and quietly. 20,000 here, 50,000 there. Enough to make people go away without admitting wrongdoing. And all those victims signed NDAs. Every single one. They can't talk about what happened. Can't warn other people. Can't tell their stories publicly. Blackstone silenced them all. Norah felt fury burning in her chest. We're going to find them. Every victim, every settlement, every NDA. And we're going to give them their voices back. Chen's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and nodded to Tyrone. Search warrant just came through. Teams heading to Montenegro's residence now. Good. Tyrone turned to Wade. You're going to call them. Give them access codes, alarm codes, tell them exactly where to find everything. And Wade, if you're lying to us, if this is some elaborate cover story and those records don't exist, the deal is off. They exist, Wade said firmly. Home office filing cabinet bottom drawer. USB drives labeled Training Materials and Evidence. Printed emails in manila folders marked by year. Settlement agreements in a locked box under my desk keys on my keychain. The search team was thorough. Within 40 minutes, they were calling in confirmations. Training videos that explicitly coded racial profiling as pattern recognition. Email chains discussing demographic targeting. Settlement agreements with ironclad NDAs. Performance reviews praising guards for proactive intervention in high-risk demographics. and a smoking gun memo from Gerald Blackstone to his regional directors outlining a profitability strategy that emphasized increased vigilance in urban market locations. Urban market locations. Code for black neighborhoods. "We've got them," Tyrone said, ending the call and turning to Wade with something like wonder. "You beautiful broken man. You've given us everything we need." Wade collapsed forward, his head hitting the table, his whole body shaking with sobs. "Will it be enough? Will it actually change anything?" "It's going to change everything," Norah promised. And she was right. The raids began at dawn. 7 states simultaneously. Federal agents with warrants descended on Blackstone's security offices from Atlanta to Los Angeles, seizing computers and files and training materials. Regional directors were arrested at their homes, executives pulled from breakfast meetings. The corporate headquarters in Charlotte locked down as investigators combed through decades of records. Norah was at the Charlotte office, watching as boxes of evidence were loaded into federal vehicles. Tyrone stood beside her phone pressed to his ear, coordinating with U.S. attorneys across multiple districts. "We've got probable cause for RICO charges," he said after hanging up. "Criminal conspiracy to deprive citizens of civil rights. Wire fraud for the interstate coordination. Money laundering for how they moved settlement funds. We're talking about federal prison time for executive leadership." Gerald Blackstone himself was arrested on the courthouse steps where he'd gone to file an emergency injunction against the raids. Camera crews captured the moment federal agents approached the 72-year-old billionaire and read him his rights. His face, tanned and confident from decades of success, crumbled as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "This is a witch hunt," he shouted at the cameras. "My company provides valuable services. We protect communities. You exploited communities," Norah called out from behind the federal line. "You built a business model on racism and called it security." Blackstone's eyes found her, and recognition flickered. "You're the agent. The one from Atlanta. Agent Norah Griffin. I've been investigating your company for 8 months, and now I'm watching it burn. One rogue employee doesn't represent 47 employees with identical patterns, hundreds of settlements, thousands of victims, corporate emails proving systematic discrimination. That's not rogue behavior, Mr. Blackstone. That's corporate policy." He had no response. The agents led him away, and Norah watched him disappear into a federal vehicle, another powerful man finally facing consequences. The media coverage was explosive. Within hours, news outlets were running stories about the Blackstone conspiracy, a nationwide network of security companies that had systematized racial profiling and covered up civil rights violations for years. The video of Wade holding Norah at gunpoint went viral, reaching 20 million views in the first day. It became a symbol, a crystallizing moment that made abstract discrimination viscerally real. Victims began coming forward. The NDAs meant nothing now. Blackstone's criminal conduct had voided their enforceability. People who'd been silenced for years suddenly had permission to speak. They called hotlines. They contacted lawyers. They told their stories on social media and news programs. A 15-year-old boy who'd been detained while buying a birthday card for his mother. A 63-year-old grandmother accused of theft while shopping for her diabetes medication. A teacher, a nurse, a veteran, an engineer, professional. People treated like criminals for the act of shopping while black. Their stories poured out, hundreds of them, then thousands, a flood of testimony that painted a devastating picture of systematic abuse. Congressional hearings were scheduled within weeks. Norah sat at the witness table, her testimony broadcast live to millions of viewers. She presented the evidence methodically, the training materials, the emails, the settlement agreements, the statistical proof of discriminatory targeting. Behind her sat 23 victims, their faces a powerful rebuke to anyone who claimed this was about individual bad actors rather than institutional rot. Private security companies operate with minimal federal oversight, Norah testified. They arm their employees and send them into public spaces with the authority to detain, to search, to use force. But unlike police, they face almost no accountability for discriminatory practices. Blackstone exploited this gap. They trained their guards to profile, rewarded them for targeting black customers, and then silenced victims with settlements and NDAs. This isn't just a civil rights violation. It's a blueprint for discrimination hidden behind corporate policies. The questions came rapid fire from both sides of the aisle. How widespread was this practice? Were other security companies involved? What regulatory framework could prevent this in the future? Norah answered each one backed by evidence and the moral weight of what she'd survived. When a senator asked whether the Blackstone case was unique, she leaned forward and spoke directly into the microphone. "No, Senator. During our investigation, we found evidence suggesting similar practices at least 6 other national security firms. Blackstone was just the most egregious, the most bold, the most profitable. But they're not alone. This is an industry problem that requires an industry solution." Within 6 months, Congress passed the Private Security Accountability Act. It mandated federal oversight of armed security companies, required bias training certification, established an independent review board for discrimination complaints, and most critically prohibited NDAs in civil rights settlement cases. Victims could no longer be silenced. The Blackstone trials began that fall. Norah attended every day of the executive proceedings, sitting in the gallery watching as Wade Montenegro took the stand. He looked different, thinner, older, carrying the weight of his testimony like physical burden. But his voice was steady as he detailed the conspiracy, as he read from emails and training materials, as he explained how systematic discrimination had been packaged as professional security practices. "They made me believe I was protecting people," Wade said during cross-examination. "They convinced me that my instincts were just good police work. But they weren't instincts. They were prejudices. Trained prejudices that served a corporate agenda." The defense attorney tried to paint him as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. Wade just shook his head. "I'm not seeking revenge. I'm seeking redemption. And the only way I can redeem myself is by telling the truth about what we did and who taught us to do it." The jury deliberated for 4 days. When they returned, the verdicts were unanimous across all counts. Gerald Blackstone guilty. Sandra Chen guilty. Richard Holloway guilty. Michael Torres guilty. Down the line, every executive who'd known about the discrimination and encouraged it faced federal conviction. The sentences were severe. Blackstone himself received 15 years. Others got 7 to 12. The company was ordered to pay $800 million in restitution to victims, an amount that effectively bankrupted the corporation. Blackstone Security dissolved within months, its assets sold off, its contracts, terminated its brand forever associated with racism and conspiracy. Wade Montenegro received 5 years with parole eligibility, after 2 for his cooperation. It was more lenient than anyone expected, but Judge Patricia Morrison explained her reasoning during sentencing. Mr. Montenegro committed serious crimes. He held a federal agent at gunpoint. He violated the civil rights of dozens of innocent people. These actions merit significant punishment. However, his cooperation exposed a conspiracy that might otherwise have continued for years. His testimony helped convict corrupt executives and protect future victims. His remorse appears genuine. Therefore, while I cannot excuse his actions, I can acknowledge his role in dismantling a system he helped create. As Wade was led from the courtroom, he looked at Norah one final time. She met his eyes and nodded once. Not forgiveness, that wasn't hers to give, but acknowledgement. He'd told the truth. He'd faced consequences. He'd helped tear down a corrupt empire. That would have to be enough. 2 years felt like both an eternity and an instant. Norah stood outside Peterson's pharmacy on a crisp October morning, the same month, nearly the same day as the incident that had changed everything. The building looked different now. The old Peterson signage had been replaced with something new. Elegant brushed metal letters that caught the morning sun. The Civil Rights Training Center. The transformation had taken 18 months. After the Blackstone verdicts, a coalition of civil rights organizations, private donors, and federal grants had purchased the building from the Peterson family, who'd been eager to move on from the notoriety. The interior had been completely redesigned, the pharmacy shelves replaced with training rooms, the prescription counter transformed into a state-of-the-art audiovisual center, the aisles where Norah had been stalked now dedicated to education and prevention. But they'd kept one section exactly as it was. The cold medicine aisle, row 4 left side, preserved behind glass like a museum exhibit with floor markers, showing where Norah had stood, where Wade had pointed the gun, where witnesses had hidden. Plaques on the wall displayed excerpts from testimonies, statistics about racial profiling, and the names of Blackstone's victims who'd agreed to be remembered publicly. "Strange feeling, isn't it?" Tyrone's voice came from behind her. He'd aged in 2 years, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. Leading the Blackstone prosecution had taken its toll, but he wore it like a badge of honor. Coming back here. "I used to have nightmares about this place," Norah admitted. "For months after. I'd dream I was back in that aisle, but the gun would go off, or I'd freeze, or I couldn't remember the words that talked him down. My therapist said it was my brain trying to process trauma by imagining different outcomes." "Are you still having them?" "Not for 6 months now. I think finally seeing Blackstone convicted, seeing this place transformed into something positive, it gave me closure." She turned to look at him. "I sleep fine. But I wake up angry." Tyrone's jaw tightened. Angry that it took one agent being held at gunpoint to expose what hundreds of victims had been reporting for years. Angry that we needed perfect evidence and viral video before anyone took systematic discrimination seriously. Angry that it took me being federal to matter. Norah finished quietly. "I know. I think about that all the time. If I'd been just a customer, just a black woman shopping for cold medicine without a badge in my pocket, would any of this have happened? Or would Wade have arrested me? Blackstone would have paid a settlement, and the whole machine would have kept running." They stood in silence, contemplating the uncomfortable truth. Justice had come, but it had required privilege, federal authority, legal expertise, resources that ordinary victims didn't have. The system had changed, but only after the system's own people were threatened. "That's why this matters," Tyrone said, gesturing to the building. "The training center, making sure the next generation of security professionals, the next wave of law enforcement learns from this. Understands what discrimination looks like in practice, not just in theory." The center's grand opening was scheduled for 10 a.m. Already people were gathering: local officials, civil rights leaders, former victims who'd become activists, and media crews documenting the transformation. Norah spotted familiar faces in the crowd. The pharmacist who'd called 911, now working with a healthcare advocacy organization. The elderly woman who'd witnessed everything, who'd become a vocal speaker about bystander intervention. The teenage boy who'd recorded the confrontation, now a freshman at Morehouse studying journalism. And there, standing slightly apart from the crowd, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, and an expression of profound discomfort, was Wade Montenegro. He'd been released 6 months ago after serving 22 months of his sentence. Good behavior, continued cooperation with federal investigations into other security companies, and genuine remorse had earned him early parole. Norah had followed his case from a distance, unsure how she felt about his redemption arc. The man had held a gun to her head. He'd targeted innocent people. He'd been complicit in systematic oppression, but he'd also torn down a corrupt empire. His testimony had been devastating to Blackstone's defense. His records had exposed a conspiracy that might have continued for years, and his willingness to speak publicly about how ordinary people become instruments of discrimination had changed countless minds. Wade saw her looking and froze. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the crowd, perpetrator and victim, both transformed by a moment neither could undo. Then Wade walked toward her. Tyrone tensed his hand instinctively, moving toward his waist, where he no longer carried a service weapon. "Norah, you don't have to..." It's okay. She kept her eyes on Wade, watching him approach with hesitant steps. He stopped 6 feet away, maintaining careful distance, his hands visible and open at his sides. "Agent Griffin," he said quietly. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. This is my story too. Our story. I needed to be here. I hoped—" Wade swallowed hard. "I hoped I might see you. I've wanted to say something for 2 years. Something more than the apology I gave in court. Something that actually captures how sorry I am, how much I regret." His voice broke. "But there aren't words big enough. There's nothing I can say that makes any of it okay." "No," Norah agreed. "There isn't. I think about it every day. That moment, your face. How calm you were while I was falling apart. You saved my life that night, you know. If you hadn't talked me down, if you'd panicked or run or done anything that made me pull that trigger." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Why are you here, Wade?" Norah asked. "Why come back to this place?" "Because I was invited. The center's board asked me to be part of the training program. They want me to talk to security professionals about how discrimination gets normalized, how corporate policies can corrupt individual judgment, how easy it is to convince yourself you're doing the right thing while causing harm." Norah raised her eyebrows. "And you agreed?" "I did. Because if I can stop one person from making the choices I made, if I can make one security guard question their biases before they escalate a situation, maybe that's worth something. Maybe that's a fraction of restitution for what I did." Restitution to who? Me. The 44 other people you targeted. The thousands of victims across Blackstone's network. To all of you, and to myself. Wade met her eyes directly now. "I have to live with what I did. Every day. Every time I look in a mirror. Every time I apply for a job and have to check the box that says I'm a convicted felon. I can't undo it. But I can spend the rest of my life making sure other people understand how I got there, so maybe they'll choose a different path." Tyrone stepped forward. "The board contacted me before they made the offer. Asked if I thought you were genuine or just trying to rehabilitate your image. You want to know what I told them?" Wade's face paled. "What?" "I told them you were both. That you're genuinely remorseful and also trying to rebuild your life, and those things aren't mutually exclusive. I told them that making you part of the training program was risky. Some victims might see it as giving you a platform you don't deserve. But I also told them that your testimony has been more effective at changing minds than a dozen academic lectures. Because you're living proof that ordinary people can be turned into instruments of oppression, and that recognizing that truth is the first step toward preventing it." Wade's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. I don't deserve your faith, but thank you." "I didn't say I have faith in you," Tyrone corrected. "I said your experience is valuable. Those are different things. You're here on probation, Wade. Literally and figuratively. You mess up, you abuse this platform, you do anything that harms the people. This center is meant to serve, and you're done. Understood?" "Understood." Norah watched this exchange, trying to sort through the tangle of her own feelings. She'd spent 2 years processing trauma, working through anger and fear and violation. She'd learned that forgiveness was complicated, that healing wasn't linear, that justice didn't erase harm. But she'd also learned that accountability could take many forms, and sometimes the most powerful testimony came from those who'd participated in the harm. "I'm not ready to shake your hand," she told Wade. "I'm not ready to call what you're doing redemption, but I'm willing to acknowledge that you're trying, that you're facing what you did instead of running from it. That counts for something." "It's more than I deserve," Wade said quietly. "Probably, but it's what you're getting." Norah turned toward the building. "Now let's go see what we built from the wreckage." The grand opening ceremony was powerful in its simplicity. No political grandstanding, no corporate sponsors, just people who'd lived through discrimination speaking their truths. The 15-year-old boy, who'd been detained for buying a birthday card, now 17, and preparing for college, talked about how the incident had nearly destroyed his trust in public spaces. The 63-year-old grandmother spoke about the dignity stolen by false accusations. A former Blackstone guard, a young Hispanic woman who'd quit rather than follow discriminatory directives, described the pressure and retaliation she'd faced. And then Norah took the podium. She'd delivered hundreds of presentations, over 2 years congressional testimony, law enforcement training, civil rights conferences. But this one felt different. Personal. This was the place where her nightmare had become a catalyst for change. 2 years ago, I walked into Peterson's pharmacy to buy cold medicine, she began. It was a mundane errand at the end of a long day. I had no idea that the next hour would define my career, expose a nationwide conspiracy, and transform my understanding of how discrimination operates in America. She paused, looking around the transformed space. Where pharmacy shelves once stood, there were now interactive exhibits showing implicit bias in action. Where Wade had stalked her through aisles, there were now training stations teaching de-escalation and cultural competence. Where she'd stood with a gun pressed to her forehead, there was now a memorial wall honoring victims of discrimination. What happened here wasn't random. It wasn't one bad apple. It was systematic, institutional, profitable discrimination. A company that built an empire by teaching people to fear black bodies, to see threats where there were only customers, to weaponize their authority against the most vulnerable among us. And they did it so effectively that decent people, people who would have sworn they weren't racist, became agents of oppression without even recognizing it. She looked directly at Wade, sitting in the third row, his face wet with tears. The man who held me at gunpoint that night wasn't a monster. He was a product, a person who'd been trained, incentivized, and rewarded for discriminatory behavior. That doesn't excuse what he did, but it explains it, and understanding how ordinary people become complicit in discrimination, that's crucial if we want to prevent it. Norah's voice strengthened. This center exists because one man's conscience overcame his conditioning, because he kept records that exposed a conspiracy, because he chose truth over self-preservation. But it also exists because 44 other victims spoke up, because a pharmacist called 911, because a teenager kept his camera rolling, because a grandmother refused to pretend she hadn't seen what she saw, because police officers prioritized de-escalation over escalation, because prosecutors pursued justice even when it was complicated, because a system that usually protects power actually held it accountable. The crowd erupted in applause. Norah waited for it to fade before continuing. The work isn't finished. Private security companies still operate with insufficient oversight. Racial profiling still happens every day in stores and airports and streets across America. Victims still face pressure to stay silent, to accept settlements, to move on without justice. But now we have proof that change is possible. We have a blueprint for accountability. We have this center, this training, this permanent reminder that when courage confronts conspiracy, truth can prevail. As she stepped away from the podium, the director of the center, a former federal judge named Maria Gonzalez, unveiled the cornerstone plaque. It read, "On this site, courage confronted conspiracy and truth prevailed. May all who enter here learn from the past to build a more just future." After the ceremony, Norah wandered through the training center, observing the exhibits with professional interest. The interactive bias simulations were sophisticated, using virtual reality to put security professionals and law enforcement in situations where they had to confront their own assumptions. The case study library included hundreds of discrimination incidents analyzed for teaching purposes. The memorial wall honored not just Blackstone victims, but people across the country who'd faced similar treatment. She found herself back at the preserved cold medicine aisle, staring through the glass at the space where her life had changed. A young boy stood there too, maybe 10 years old, reading the plaques with intense concentration. "That's where she stood," his mother said softly, pointing. "The federal agent, right there. Can you imagine how brave she must have been?" The boy looked up at Norah, not recognizing her. "Do you think she was scared?" Norah smiled. I think she was terrified. But she didn't let fear stop her from doing what was right. My teacher says that's what courage is. Being scared but doing it anyway. Your teacher is very wise. The boy went back to reading, and Norah felt something settle in her chest. This was why the center mattered, not for her, but for this child, and thousands like him. Kids who would grow up learning about discrimination as historical fact rather than accepted practice. Who would understand that systematic injustice could be confronted and dismantled? Who would demand better from the institutions meant to protect them? She found Wade later in one of the training rooms, setting up for his first session. He was arranging chairs in a circle, his movements careful and deliberate. Nervous? She asked from the doorway. He jumped, then nodded. Terrified. What if they don't listen? What if they think I'm just making excuses? What if I can't explain how it happened in a way that makes sense? Then you try again, and again, until you find the words. Norah entered the room taking in the materials. He'd prepared copies of Blackstone training manuals, printed emails, statistics on discriminatory stops. This is good work, Wade. Thorough, honest. I'm trying to show them everything. The whole pipeline from corporate policy to individual action. How discrimination gets disguised as professionalism. That's exactly what they need to see. She paused. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you really believe you've changed, or are you just performing change because it's what people expect? Wade set down the stack of papers he was holding and looked at her directly. I don't know. I want to believe I'm different, that I've learned that I'll never make those choices again. But I also know that 2 years ago I would have sworn I wasn't racist. I would have genuinely believed I was a good person doing important work. So how can I trust my own judgment now? How can I be sure I'm not just fooling myself in a different way? That uncertainty, that questioning of your own judgment, that's growth. The Wade Montenegro who held me at gunpoint was absolutely certain he was right. You're not certain anymore. That's progress. Is it enough? I don't know, but it's something. Norah moved toward the door, then paused. I'm not going to tell you we're okay, Wade. I'm not going to say all is forgiven. But I will say this, what you're doing here matters. It's uncomfortable and difficult and necessary, so keep doing it. I will, for as long as they'll let me. Norah left him to his preparations and found Tyrone in what used to be the pharmacy manager's office, now converted into the center's administrative hub. He was on the phone, his expression darkening as he listened. When? He asked sharply. And you're certain? Okay, keep me posted. He hung up and looked at Norah. That was Agent Chen. He's been tracking civil rights complaints against private security companies since Blackstone fell. He's seeing patterns emerge at 3 other firms, same training practices, same discriminatory targeting, same settlement structures. They didn't learn. Oh, they learned. They learned to be more careful about documentation. But the behavior continues. Tyrone's jaw tightened. Which means our work continues. How do we stop it? We took down Blackstone. We passed federal legislation. We created training centers. And still, it's not enough. It's never enough. Because we're fighting something deeper than corporate policy. We're fighting centuries of conditioning of fear of power structures built on the dehumanization of black and brown bodies. Blackstone was a symptom, not the disease. Norah sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. So what do? We keep fighting. Case by case, company by company, person by person. We train the next generation. We document the abuses. We hold people accountable. It's not glamorous. It's not fast. But it's how change actually happens, not in dramatic courtroom victories, but in the daily grinding work of shifting culture and consciousness. Sometimes I wonder if we're making any difference at all. Tyrone pulled out his phone and showed her a video. It was from a training session last month, a room full of private security guards watching Wade's testimony. One guard, a young white man, maybe 25, stood up afterward with tears on his face. I've been doing what he described, the guard said on the video. Not as extreme, but I've been watching black customers more closely, following them, assuming the worst. And I told myself it was just good security, just being thorough. But it's not. It's profiling. And I need to stop." Tyrone turned off the video. "That guard contacted us afterward. Said he wanted to file a complaint against his own company for the training he'd received. Said he couldn't unsee what Wade had shown him. That's one person, Norah. One person who changed course because of the work we've done. Multiply that by hundreds, thousands, and yes, we're making a difference." Norah felt tears prick her eyes. "I needed to hear that, today especially. Coming back here, seeing Wade, remembering everything I needed to believe it meant something. It meant everything. You survived. You fought back. You transformed trauma into testimony and pain into policy. That's not nothing, Norah. That's heroic." Later that evening, as the grand opening events wound down and crowds dispersed, Norah found herself alone in the preserved cold medicine aisle one more time. She pressed her hand against the glass, her palm flat against the barrier between past and present. "I forgive you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to Wade, to the space itself, or to some part of herself that still carried the weight of that night. "I wondered if I'd find you here." The voice was familiar, the teenage boy from the pharmacy, though he was 17 now, taller and more confident. "I'm Marcus, by the way. I don't think we were ever properly introduced. I was too busy recording you to introduce myself." "You probably saved my life with that recording," Norah said. "Having that video evidence, having proof of what really happened, it made all the difference. My journalism professor says I captured one of the most important civil rights moments of the decade. Says I should be proud." Marcus looked at the preserved aisle. "But mostly I just remember being terrified. I thought he was going to shoot you. I thought I was about to watch someone die, and all I could do was keep my phone steady." "But you did keep it steady. When everyone else was running or hiding, you stayed. You bore witness. That takes courage." "You're the one with courage. I just held a camera." "Marcus, do you know what happened to most of the other videos from that night?" "The ones from other witnesses?" Norah asked. He shook his head. "They were shaky, out of focus. They cut off when people ran. They captured fear but not clarity. Your video was different. It was clear, comprehensive, damning. It showed every word, every gesture, every moment of escalation. Without that, Wade's lawyers might have argued that he felt genuinely threatened, that the situation was ambiguous. Your recording removed all ambiguity." Marcus absorbed this. "I'm going to Howard next year, studying journalism. I want to document injustice. Make sure people can't ignore it or deny it. Your case taught me that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just point a camera and refuse to look away. The world needs more journalists like you. People willing to bear witness, even when it's dangerous or uncomfortable." They stood together, two people connected by trauma and testimony, looking at a frozen moment of history. "Do you think things are better now?" Marcus asked. "Really better? Or did we just win one battle in a war that never ends?" Norah considered the question carefully. "Both maybe. Things are better. Blackstone is gone. Laws have changed. Thousands of victims found their voices. But the forces that created Blackstone still exist. Fear, prejudice, the profit motive, and discrimination. So yes, we won a battle. But the war continues. And people like you, the next generation, you're going to have to keep fighting it." "I will," Marcus promised. "I won't let this be forgotten." As night fell over the Civil Rights Training Center, lights illuminated the building from within, making it glow like a beacon. Norah stood on the sidewalk where news crews had once swarmed, where federal vehicles had blocked traffic, where her life had irrevocably changed. She thought about Wade Montenegro, preparing to face room after room of security professionals, carrying his shame and his truth like twin burdens. She thought about the victims who'd found their voices, who'd transformed their pain into activism. She thought about Tyrone and Chen, and all the federal agents still chasing down the next Blackstone, the next conspiracy, the next injustice. And she thought about herself, The woman who'd walked into a pharmacy for cold medicine and walked out as something different. Not a hero, not a victim. Something more complicated. A survivor who'd refused to let trauma define her. An investigator who'd turned a personal violation into a professional victory. A black woman who'd looked down the barrel of a gun and chosen to speak truth anyway. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Saw the ceremony on the news. So proud of you, baby. You changed the world. Norah smiled through tears and typed back. We changed it together. All of us. And we're not done yet. As she walked away from the center heading home through streets that felt both familiar and transformed, Norah carried with her the weight and lightness of justice. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't complete. But it was real. A gun had once symbolized fear oppression, the terrible power of prejudice backed by force. Now it symbolized something else the moment fear was confronted, when an unarmed woman faced down armed hatred with nothing but truth and courage. The moment a conspiracy cracked open. The moment ordinary people chose extraordinary courage. 2 years later, the story wasn't over. It would never be over. Not really. But it had transformed from tragedy into testimony, from violation into vindication, from one woman's nightmare into a nation's wake-up call. And somewhere in a training center, built from the ruins of a pharmacy on a wall dedicated to memory and justice, a plaque bore silent witness to a truth that would echo for generations. When courage confronts conspiracy, when victims refuse silence, when ordinary people choose extraordinary action, justice doesn't just survive, it prevails.